Is Your Audio Sound Installment 4? Let's get physical. This is a podcast for people doing audio in church. The ideas are relevant in all live sound applications, but the words and examples I use are generally from the church context. I avoid using technical jargon and use everyday words in an attempt to make what seems complex a little easier to understand. So let's start with fallback speakers, also known as monitor speakers. Some churches have none or a few, some churches have lots. These are the speakers that are pointing at the stage dwellers so they can hear themselves and each other. Usually, these are able to provide independent combinations of sounds made up of various instruments and singers to help the band members do their thing. It may be counterintuitive, but the more monitor speakers you have, the quieter your stage can be, which is very important, but that's another instalment. My reasoning for this is that if you can achieve a single person to a single monitor speaker, and you have the control capability, then each person can be provided exactly the sounds they need and nothing else. It's called control. So a similar but touchy subject that could be included in the instalment Turn It Down is whether to drum or not to drum. I've been down this road many times, and I have a huge respect for drummers because I love being a musician playing with a drummer. The problem in the church context is that acoustic drum kits are naturally loud, and if you go all the way back to instalment 1, we want the congregation to be able to hear themselves, which is often a challenge with a cracking snare drum on stage. There are some ways to try and address this volume problem, and they are all compromises. For example, ask your drummer to play with brushes or hot rods. Hot rods are a bunch of flexible chopsticks taped together in a bundle, or possibly put a towel on the snare drum. The problem with all of these options is they hinder the player's ability to play in the feel and style that they enjoy, which impacts their output. The results often sound half-hearted. Some other options of the physical solution variety include putting soft furnishings around the kit in an attempt to absorb some of the sound. Another one that you notice in larger churches is clear perspex or clear plastic screens around a drum kit. These have two benefits. One is that it limits the sound from getting into all of the other microphones on stage. The second is that it is so blisteringly loud inside that perspex box, the drummer just naturally plays more quietly. It's a bit like their brain says, it hurts. So they just don't hit as hard. Now my next option will make most drummers cringe, but it's what we've set up in our church, and that's an electronic drum kit. We purchased an entry-level kit with mesh heads, so it's reasonable to play and it sounds okay. And we talked to our drummers pretty much in the way I've discussed here, and came to the conclusion that the best and most musical way for them to play would be on an electronic drum kit. And then we have complete control over the sound. While I'm not a drummer, I understand drummers generally don't like using electronic kits. But the experience in our environment from the last couple of years is that drummers are able to play far more musically and spend much less of their Sunday being told that they're too loud. Some more general rules for noise control are that you want monitor speakers to always point away from the congregation. A super tip is to think of a monitor speaker like a torch. If the light is not on your face, then you won't be able to hear. That's the best the speaker has to offer when you're looking at it front on. This is a huge consideration for players with music stands and music folders. These are not audibly transparent. So, stand at each musician's position and check you can see the entire front face of the assigned monitor speaker and that it is pointing straight at you. If it's not, something needs to move. You also want the sound being generated on stage by both monitor speakers and instruments to be as minimal or quiet as possible. So, as much as you can, you'll then have a clean slate in your congregation space to make your front of house system do its thing. Some things to think about while you're setting up the stage with your music team. One significant issue is guitar amps. Many times I've seen them sat on the floor pointing at the congregation, blasting past the guitarist's knees. There's no argument that they sound awesome in row 10. It's really worth grabbing some of those guitar amp stands from your local music shop or the interwebs, putting your amps on them and using them to point the amplifiers at the guitarist's ears, just like you do with your foldback speakers. That way, the guitarist can hear the complete sound that they are generating. You'll hear me say so many times in these installments, you need to control the sound on stage. Or put another way, you need to reduce the sound coming off stage, so you have as much control in the congregation space as possible. Probably the one topic that's anything like new in the world of sound, other than digital mixing consoles, is the idea of in-ear foldback. Pretty much every professional musician you see on stage these days has some form of earbuds in their ears, and many do not have any foldback speakers or monitor speakers on the stage in front of them. These can have huge benefits for the performer. In general, the earbuds seal the ear canal, so Steve can't hear acoustic sound and can only hear what is reproduced through the earbuds. If your mixer is able to provide this level of control, it can be an awesome way for each singer or musician to hear exactly what they need to hear and to help you as the front of house sound person to control the sound for your congregation because you have no noise coming from stage. A little pro tip: if you're using in-ears, it's an excellent idea to have a microphone pointing at the congregation, which the musicians can add into their ears so they can actually hear what is going on in the room at the time. It's called ambience. In-ears naturally isolate, so we need to facilitate the connection with the congregation. So there we are. The Let's Get Physical installment is now over. In other 10-minute installments, I'm planning to continue the physical theme in an installment named Secrets Behind the Pew, give you some tips for vocalists to use their microphones effectively, and chat about why neatness and godliness go hand in hand. If you haven't listened to installment 1, please do, as it's the starting point to launch from. All the others are optional, but in a suggested order. Many of the ideas do overlap and should help you on your journey. But until that day comes, I will go and warn the darkness that the light of Jesus Christ has overcome.